Production support for this episode of In Focus is provided by WTIU members. Thank you.
Tuition, student loans, state funding, and graduation rates are just a few of the topics universities and colleges are trying to address during this year's budget session of the Indiana General Assembly. But many legislators say secondary schools are not doing enough to lower their tuition or their student debt. We'll discuss the issues universities and students are facing as we put higher education in focus. And thanks for joining us for this edition of In Focus. I'm Stan Jastrzebski. Higher education institutions are seeking additional funding from the Indiana General Assembly this session, but legislators are asking for several concessions in return. WTIU's Gretchen Frazee reports on some of the key issues that are up for discussion this year.
Universities are getting more dollars from the legislature than ever before, about $1.7 billion this year. But the percentage of funding from the state has actually declined as schools' budgets have expanded. That could change this year because of the budget surplus, says Senate Appropriations Committee Chairman Luke Kenley.
This year, for the first time in 5 or 6 years, the state may be in a little better position to actually give universities some operating funding. We even had to cut a couple of times. And we are hoping that when we do that we can get the universities to agree not to raise tuition beyond certain points, like let's say the cost of living or something of that nature.
How much money they will receive is still up for discussion. Governor Mike Pence has proposed a 1% increase in higher education funding, but that's significantly below the 7% increase the Commission for Higher Education recommended. And some legislators want to put stipulations on the funding, in addition to making schools promise to stabilize tuition rates. State Senator Jim Banks says before the state gives universities and colleges more money, the institutions should be more transparent about how that money is used.
Even though the percentage is less today of what the state funds of their total budget, Hoosier taxpayers still provide billions of dollars every couple of years to our universities to build buildings, and we should, as Hoosiers, we should expect more out of that investment than perhaps what we're getting.
Student loans are also a hot topic this session. Students are graduating with more debt than ever before, and they aren't necessarily using that money on tuition, Kenley says.
We're trying to make sure that debt that students take on is used for education. There are some stories, and they maybe just be that people are borrowing money and then using it for other things other than education. So I think we're going to probably be tightening those standards up a little bit.
The Lumina Foundation's Vice President of Policy and Strategy, Dwayne Matthews, says there are many legitimate expenses besides tuition that student loans should be used for. He says that's something that should be addressed at the university level.
It's part of the advising and counseling that students need to be able to make very good, informed, intelligent choices about paying for college. If we make this aid available and we don't provide that sort of guidance, it can create problems.
There are many other issues that need to be addressed, but Matthews says the key is whether enough students can get the education they need to create a productive workforce.
There is overwhelming evidence that people, and many, many more people, need this post-secondary education. And the state as a whole and the nation as a whole need them to get it. Our economy depends on it. This is not just whether somebody can get a good job and somebody else gets a less good job. This is about whether or not we can actually supply our employers, our industry, our government and public services with the qualified people that we need to be able to do the work.
And with only 1/3 of the state's population holding a college degree, higher education officials say they recognize Indiana has a lot of room for improvement.
And joining us in studio tonight to discuss these issues are John Applegate, Indiana University's Executive Vice President for Regional Affairs, Planning and Policy Planning. Also, John Weikart, the Chancellor of Ivy Tech Bloomington, and Al Diaz, Executive Vice President for Business and Finance at Purdue University. Thanks to the three of you for being here. Let me get a response to this first question from all three of you. And Al, we'll start with you and we'll come back down the panel. You've probably heard, as we have in our newsroom in the last couple of weeks, how the Republicans in the state legislature disagree a little bit with Governor Pence about higher education funding. Governor Pence wanted a smaller increase than it sounds like the leaders in the legislature want. What, if anything, does that disconnect make you think about or make your university change its message about going to lobby those lawmakers to get some part of the state's budgetary pie?
Well, I think that we don't want to get into a discussion about what the priorities need to be necessarily in the state. I wouldn't argue with either the governor or the legislature about their priorities. I will say that one of the things that we are trying to do consistently is to change the conversation to one that actually reinforces the fact that investments in higher education are investments in the future, both from the standpoint of the workforce, but also the economy of the state. And so we're trying to be very positive about it and just reinforce the message that an investment in higher education is an investment in the future.
Chancellor Weikart, what about Ivy Tech? How does the discussion going on about how much to fund higher ed affect Ivy Tech?
Well, the legislature's responsibility is to craft the budget. So if the discussion is between 7% or 1%, then I would assume we'd be down on the side of 7% and hope the legislature is able to exert its will. I agree with Al. We're talking about an investment in the state of Indiana. And a friend of mine told me once that if you were in a room full of people and you said, everyone here who wants to go to heaven, raise your hand, everyone would raise their hand. And then if you said, now if you want to die, raise your hand, no one does. And some of that applies to funding for education in the state of Indiana. We want to increase graduation rates. We want to double them in the next several years to attain our goals, to move us up, and to be more competitive with other states and with other nations, quite frankly, but are we willing to pay for that? And I think those are some tough decisions and some tough choices. And if the legislature and the governor are serious and they want us to meet the goals that they want to set forth for us, and we want to meet those goals, then we need support.
And what about where IU is concerned?
Well, of course, we've been telling our story to the Commission for Higher Education, to the various committees of the state legislature for the last few months, and I think that's something that we'll need to continue to do with the governor and with everyone else. There's a great story to tell for IU and I think for higher education. The case is clearly out there, and the gentleman from Lumina made the point very nicely of the importance of higher education to the state's economy, to the state's society. And we will continue to make that case and work with the governor, work with the legislature, work with the Commission for Higher Education to do that.
Of course, I don't have to tell the three of you that the governor, of course, gets the last word in this because he's got the budgetary veto power to do what Governor Daniels did and take large chunks out of that higher ed budget if he wants to. So let's assume that the lawmakers pass their slightly higher education funding plan and it gets to the governor. He could go ahead and sign it and then redact some of that money later. Does that possibility worry any of your institutions?
Well, this is a situation that's the constitutional organization of the state for quite some time, and so we operate under those circumstances or under those conditions all the time. And again, what we try to do is tell our story and tell the story of higher education as effectively as we possibly can, as to emphasize the investment, to emphasize the cost-cutting measures, the efficiencies that we at IU, for example, have championed. So I think that story is one that we will continue to focus on.
John, let me ask you, one of the things Governor Pence has said he wants to do is increase the funding to and increase the opportunity to get vocational education in the state, which is something your university system is probably better prepared to do than IU or Purdue is. Does that benefit Ivy Tech disproportionately, that push, do you think?
Well, I don't know that it will benefit disproportionately. I would take some issue with the description of us as a vocational training institution, a vocational school.
Well, you have to admit that Ivy Tech does that better than IU or Purdue does.
Well, I would say technical and professional and career education perhaps, but again, I think there may be attached to the word vocational a description that I don't know is particularly appropriate to what Ivy Tech is doing right now. Will remain to be seen what the governor means by his push for stronger vocational education and whether that push is in the K-12 area or where it might be. We certainly have as part of our mission workforce development. And one of our goals with our associate applied science degrees is entry-level degrees so that our students can earn those degrees and directly enter the workforce. But the second part of our mission is our transfer responsibility, and we've established some very strong transfer relationships that save the state a great deal of money. And of course, our strongest relationship, and I sit here among two system administrators, and I'm a lowly regional campus chancellor, but we have very strong relationships with our four-year partners, particularly here in Bloomington with IU Bloomington, and I hope we keep a focus on the comprehensive nature of a community college's mission as well.
Al, you mentioned earlier you wanted to be careful about how you defined the priorities of the legislature and the priorities of the state and the mission. What do you think this new administration's mission is with respect to higher education? Because they've been very forward about saying we want more vocational training, we want to cater to people who don't necessarily want to go to four-year schools. That would seem to kind of leave Purdue a little bit out in the cold in some cases.
Well, no, I don't think it leaves us out in the cold at all, frankly, and that isn't a concern of ours. I think that the chancellor talked about something that I think is really worth thinking about, and that is that each of the institutions in the state have a role, have a mission, and it's interesting that recently we've been having more and more conversations about how collaboration among the institutions can reinforce the effect that we can have. And so we've had discussions with Ivy Tech, we've had discussions with Vincennes and other institutions, our own regional campuses, about issues that relate to the full spectrum from research in economically significant fields that go all the way through the workforce development that's associated with expanding those fields. Some traditional to Indiana, like manufacturing, and others emerging, and I say emerging, but I think Indiana has established itself well in the biotech field, one that IU has got a notable role in, as well as Purdue. And so frankly, I don't worry about the budget emphasizing or disenfranchising any of the institutions. What I am mainly interested in is, again, reinforcing this message that the higher education system is a part of the solution for the state in the future, and every element of it can contribute in some way. I think that message has to become clear so that I think in the end, both the legislature and the governor can agree that there's a way forward that includes a significant investment in higher education, whether it's 1% or 7% or something in between.
Since you brought it up, let me ask you first and then ask the other two gentlemen about the idea of collaboration between the state's public higher education institutions. Obviously, there are a number of agreements already in place, from operating regional campuses jointly to IU and Purdue, collaborating various ways here in Bloomington. What do you think the future is for collaboration between the universities? I think at some point there's a tendency to think of you as competitors, but I get the sense the three of you on this panel think of yourselves as collaborators and even increasingly collaborative.
Yeah, I think that it is, well, it's clear to me that we are far better together than we are individually. There's this traditional rivalry between IU and Purdue, but it doesn't extend to academics. The fact of the matter is that IU has a set of competencies and emphasizes fields that, frankly, we don't emphasize at Purdue. And I think there's a lot to be said for collaborations among all the institutions in the state.
Other thoughts on that?
Well, I could piggyback on what Al said before. I agree with you very much, and I put it in a somewhat different way, which is that Indiana needs a diverse higher education portfolio, so to speak, to support the diverse economy that it's going to need in the future. And I think that diversity shows itself in a lot of ways that the current system for higher education in Indiana is well suited to. So it's the diversity of subjects, it's the diversity of levels of education, it includes institutions that are very focused on regions and workforce development and regional economic development, ones that are much more focused on cutting edge research, very high-end, very challenging research, and everything in between. I think that's a real strength of the higher education system in Indiana. And so I would very much agree with Al that the governor's emphasis on one part of it, I don't hear him saying that that's the only part that's important or the only part that he's supportive of, but a focus on that is to be expected in a new administration.
Well, and if I may, when we speak of collaborations, and again, I'm the chancellor of one region in a 14-region system, but our relationship with the university is light years ahead of where it was in terms of program articulation, in terms of programs like Hoosier Link, where we dually enroll students who are enrolled both at IU Bloomington and Ivy Tech Bloomington, taking courses and transferring back. We've just entered into an agreement with Purdue University, the Anderson campus, where the engineering technology baccalaureate degree, our students who are coming out of our associate degree program, we're looking at faculty from Purdue campus coming to our campus and teaching baccalaureate level campuses in our technology labs. So I think we need to tell those stories to the legislature and to the governor, and if the governor or any legislators still believe that we are operating in silos, then we need to do a better job explaining that we're not and how collaborative these relationships have become.
On this next question, Al, I'm going to give you the last word, but I'm going to give these two the first word, starting down here with John. How does Mitch Daniels, being the president of Purdue now, change the educational landscape in this state? I mean, I would think that if you're on the Indiana University campus, you look at that as a challenge in some ways, because I think you're always looking at how does the president, for instance, the president of IU stack up with the president of Purdue in terms of importance with the legislature in some ways, and now you've got Michael McRobbie, who's worked to forge a lot of relationships in Indianapolis with the guy who used to run everything in Indianapolis. How do you see it?
Oh, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. The IU has worked well with the governor when he was governor, and in the run-up to him becoming president, I know that the two presidents now have been in touch. I think that they've continued a very strong relationship. I mean, the point about IU and Purdue, and it really includes Ivy Tech as well, in the sense that we are very much partners in this enterprise, increasingly partners. So I think having a strong, well-informed collaborator in West Lafayette and for the Purdue regional campuses is good for the state, it's good for Purdue, and it's good for IU.
Ivy Tech, of course, did very well financially, a lot of people think, under the Daniels administration. What do you think Ivy Tech administrators from President Snyder on the way down think of having former Governor Daniels, now President Daniels, in West Lafayette?
Well, I think President Snyder, our president, has a very good working relationship with now President Daniels. I think what will be interesting to watch as it develops will be how the former governor and now the president's perceptions of higher education working from the inside, looking from the inside out, may change or evolve or develop over the coming months and years. So I look forward to watching that. Al,
when you heard that the governor was becoming your next president, did you think of it as a coup of sorts?
Careful now.
No.
Not, and I don't mean militarily, I mean, boy, we got a good one.
You're right, there are two ways to think
That's
about
right.
that.
It does sound a little bit like a military campaign. No, I mean, and frankly, I've gotten to know the governor in the role as governor as my colleagues have. And frankly, I was pleased to see today that the Governor Pence has suggested that one of the reasons that the state is in as good a shape as it is to make the kinds of decisions to invest that it has is because of the stewardship of the previous governor. And I think he's going to bring a lot of that same leadership to Purdue. But I think based on everything that we've seen and having spent some time with him in the past 6 months while he's transitioned, I think his insight into things that are statewide as well as, frankly, national will provide Indiana in general with a resource that frankly we haven't had before. And so I don't see it as a plus for us and a minus for others. I think it's a plus for everyone in the state and for higher education especially.
I'll open this up to whoever wants to answer it first. I'm curious how the three of you get the sense public university officials feel about the changes that have been made to the K through 12 education system in the state in the last couple of years. Some of them have been very controversial. Some of them the new superintendent says she wants to change. The one that came immediately to mind that I wanted to ask you about, and you can feel free to branch off anywhere you like, is vouchers, because it seems to me that the voucher system in some ways is a training ground almost. If you're using a voucher to choose which is the best school for your child, that's a little like choosing a university because you want to find the best fit, the best education, but nonetheless you have a monetary concern as well. Are there K through 12 education policies that you think in the last couple of years have been particularly positive or negative as they relate to your schools?
Well, we think about it in two different ways. One, of course, is that we have schools of education which prepare teachers. And of course, we prepare teachers for their work in all kinds of different school settings. And so the fact that there's a different mix of settings is a challenge maybe, but it's one that we've already embraced and will continue to. The other way that we care about it and care very deeply is the quality of the preparation, because Indiana students, the graduates of Indiana high schools, are a very big part of the entering student cohort for all of our campuses. And so the quality of the K through 12 education is of enormous importance to us. And so we have tried to be as supportive as possible of the efforts of the state, of individual schools, of school districts, in assuring that that students who come out of high school who want to go on to college at whatever level are college ready.
Other thoughts on whether the state's K through 12 is benefiting you?
Well, if I may, among the many changes that have taken place or are taking place is one where the high schools are moving towards more dual credit opportunities for high school students and a requirement that students earn dual credits and have some college credits in hand when they graduate. We have a couple of models of that in Bloomington with the early college models at Bloomington High School North and South and with New Tech High School, where students at New Tech are required to have 12 college credit hours when they graduate. So it's both an opportunity and a challenge as we work with our high school colleagues on developing more dual credit opportunities for high school students. The challenge is that's not currently part of the state's funding formula. So how the state goes about assisting funding for students who are earning dual credit is another financial challenge for the state.
Al, let me phrase it a little differently to you. Okay. Respective to technology programs that have been put in under the Bennett administration and probably to continue under the Ritz administration, for instance, getting more students to use iPads, more students to use electronic textbooks, those are the types of initiatives it strikes me would lead to a good foundation for a lot of the engineering, for instance, that Purdue produces. Do you think those are the sorts of things that can be even further built upon to bring in prospective good candidates for a Purdue education?
Well, I think any emphasis on technology and exposure to technology is going to be good for K through 12 students. And I wanted to agree in a way with the other two speakers that, frankly, I've been pleased to see that there has been such emphasis on K through 12. Because I do think when you think about the suite of public and private higher education institutions that are available to Hoosiers in this state, it's really astonishing when you look at it, from the standpoint of the quality of education that's available, and anything that can be done to prepare those students better to take advantage of that, it has got to be worthwhile.
Let me get a final response from each of the three of you in 30 or 45 seconds apiece. If you had to say you need one thing from this budget session of the legislature as you work to bring your budgets back to where they were before the recession, before the state had to cut some money, and John, we'll start with you and go down the panel. If you had to have one thing for IU, Ivy Tech, and Purdue out of this legislative session, what would that one thing be, do you think?
Well, I think if I have to pick one, it would be the support for the performance funding initiative of the Commission that is from new resources, rather than taking resources and redistributing them. I think that we made, I believe, a compelling case to the Commission and to the legislature about the efforts that we've made in being more efficient, and the terrific programs that we offer that are tremendous value to the state of Indiana. And I think that the ability of the state to back that up and continue that very positive trajectory is what we're looking for.
All right, in 30 seconds, what do you need from the legislators?
Well, I'm going to be very selfish. I need for the legislature to approve our Phase 2 construction project here in Bloomington so that we can expand our campus. We've more than doubled the size of our student body in the 10 years we've been in our current building. If there's an expectation that we're going to double and triple graduation rates over the next 15 years, we're not only out of space, but we're spending $500,000 a year to lease space. And so we need relief from rental prices we're paying, and if we're going to grow our enrollment, we've got to have more space.
All right, Al, you get the last word. What do you need?
We need an opportunity for a dialogue to talk about all of the positive contributions that higher education, and in particular Purdue, in our case, can make to the economy and to the future of the state.
So this is one of those types of topics that we never quite get to everything we want to get to, and I hope we'll be able to continue a conversation with the three of you, and we want to certainly encourage all of our viewers and our listeners to be a part of these sorts of conversations as well, and we'll provide them opportunities to get a hold of the university representatives, and hopefully we can continue that discussion well after this program is in the can somewhere. But thanks so much to the three of you for coming in and for helping us get through some of these issues, and we'll watch how they affect your universities as the legislative session goes on.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Please do send us your questions for our next program. That email address is infocus@indiana.edu. You can leave a comment or see the full video of this show anytime you like at our website, indianapublicmedia.org/infocus. Thanks for watching and for listening, and have a nice night.
Production support for this episode of In Focus is provided by WTIU members. Thank you.